Hello readers, I'm Amy and back for another wrap up. This will be like the end of July and first week of August sort of reading. Again, I've restructured my wrap up so I'm not doing a whole month at a time because that's a lot of books to remember. It's been stressing me out. So doing these smaller wrap ups, I already love how it's going. I feel so much less pressure to do the wrap-ups. I can remember more of the books. I don't have to take so many notes. And books that I read in the time period that I'm covering that already have individual reviews will not be mentioned during this video because it just feels redundant to me. So let's go ahead and get started. The first book I'm going to discuss is Spin. And this book, I watch a lot of Emily Fox. She's like the sci-fi queen on BookTube. She's been encouraging me to read more sci-fi because I enjoy sci-fi. I just don't read that much of it. And also for the Devour Your TBR challenge for July, it was Sci-Fi July, so we're focusing on sci-fi books. And so I picked up Spin. I got it on Audible. I was listening to the book. It's, what, like 16 hours? 17 and a half hours. I didn't love it. It's got a lot of really good reviews. It seems like a really popular sci-fi book. It's from like the early 2000s. You have these three people, two siblings and their friend, who are hanging out outside when the stars just disappear. And ends up Earth is in its own kind of atmosphere that has changed how time works out in space versus on the Earth, and that's happening to some other planets that are colonized. And that original idea was really, really cool. I thought that sci-fi part of it was amazing. But so much of this book just focused on relationships between the characters that I didn't necessarily feel all that invested in. And I just lost interest and I sped through the last part of the book. I'm like, I just want to get this over with. I've put too much time into this to DNF it now. And it was way less of a sci-fi and way more of a relationship drama, which if that's your thing, like, totally go for it. But I went into Spin looking for hard sci-fi and that's just not what I found. That wasn't the focus of the book, which is the reason that I was reading in the first place. So definitely not my favorite book of July. That might have actually been my least favorite book, because July was pretty decent. Yeah, that was by far my least favorite book in July. Then we have Dorothy Must Die. So it seems to be a bit of a theme with me lately that I'm picking up quite a few young adult books. This one, if you're not familiar with my hauls and unhauls, whenever I do a book haul, say my fall book haul, which is whenever I bought this, then in spring, I will do my spring haul my fall haul revisit in spring because 2 seasons later. And in spring, I realized that out of the few books that I bought last fall, this is the only one that I hadn't read. So it's like, oh, I need to go ahead and read this because if I don't read this, then I must just not be that interested in it. And I picked it up from my friend who hasn't finished the series and she wants to, and I finished this book and I went ahead and bought the rest of the series. This is a young adult novel. I say that loosely. It's got a lot of the tropes that are pretty heavy in young adult books, that are pretty common to young adult books, and it's kind of got the young adult writing style. And really, this book contained everything that I would normally hate in books, but I just loved it. I don't know if I just needed an easier read at the time or what, but I am so in love with this and I can't wait to continue the series. So Dorothy Must Die is about the other girl from Kansas who gets caught up in a storm and flown over to Oz. And ends up Dorothy actually ruined everything. She's like the queen of Oz. If you're not a happy, perfect, wonderful person, then you're gonna die. The Tin Soldier has an army and his feelings are really getting in the way of things, and the lion's courage is causing a lot of death and general horrible things. Glinda the Good Witch is maybe not so good. The Scarecrow is kind of like a Dr. Mengele character where he's like experimenting on people and it's really freaky. And this was so dark, and I loved it. And we're following the evil characters. So like the what was it called? The wicked, some sort of wicked society that includes some of the quote unquote wicked characters, like some of the wicked witches, and our main character, Amy Gum. I should have remembered that name because that's my name. Not the Gum part, but the Amy part. She is joining this wicked society and trying to figure out like why she was even brought to Oz, thinking about her mom that she left behind in Kansas and all the troubles that she had in Kansas. This book gets really, really dark too, which is why I'm kind of hesitant to just label it as young adult, because it's dark in the places that you don't normally find in young adult. Like it can get pretty gruesome. But I absolutely loved this, and there are 3 other books in the main series. The Wicked Will Rise, The Yellow Brick War, and The End of Oz. I'm looking forward to reading all of those. There are also 9 prequel novellas. That's a lot of novellas. I may or may not read those. I haven't really decided. I think I'll go ahead and finish this series first and like try and hold myself off from piling anything more on my TBR, and then find out how I feel about it later. But I loved this. I loved it. Then, let me find the beginning of my August reads. Alright, I have 3 more books to talk about. Okay. So next up was The Robots of Dawn. Again, this was for Sci-Fi July. I wasn't able to finish it in July, and it was going to be my classic. So for my classic goal, where I'm reading 1 classic per month, this will not count for July because it's not when I finished it. But The Robots of Dawn is the second to last book in the Robots series. I have all of the books here. They're all gorgeous, like this one. And not my favorite in the series. So there's like an order in which you're supposed to read them. It can either be the order in which they're written or the order in which Isaac Asimov thinks you should read them. There's a couple of different recommendations lists. I started off with I, Robot, which is a short story series. I loved it. It was when I first really found that I could enjoy short stories. The rest of the Robots is another short story series, which I actually read right before this one. So I read it as the 4th book in the series because on the back we have these different kind of art pieces. These are each on the covers of each book, so I read them mostly in the order that Isaac Asimov recommends, but also the order in which they appear on the back of the book. And I think the rest of the Robots would have been better to read right after I, Robot, because it's another short story collection. It kind of goes along with that. Not as good as I, Robot, but I still enjoyed it. Caves of Steel was the first book in the series. Wasn't loving it because it was very character driven, and being sci-fi, I felt like I didn't get a chance to know the world first. But when I got through Caves of Steel, I really loved The Naked Sun, because by the time I was reading The Naked Sun, I had established what this world was, and we really got to dive into the psychology of the different worlds that Isaac Asimov has created, the different planets in this world. And then The Robots of Dawn was a slog. Like, I felt like there was more plot to the other books, or maybe not more plot, but they were shorter, so you could focus more on the plot. But this book, this is over 400 pages. Almost all of it is dialogue. A lot of it is dialogue between the same 2 characters, and the plot it was so slow to get through all of the dialogue and all of the character building. All of it was just really taking its time. I feel like this book should have been cut in half, considering the plot that we follow. It was fine. It was not my favorite in the series. I am going to finish it because I only have Robots and Empire left, and then I would like to pick up his next 3 books. I can't remember what they're called. It's like Pebbles in the Sky and 2 other books, but they're kind of in between the Robots and Foundation series. Eventually I'd like to read the Foundation series. Again, I'm trying to not pile so much on my TBR. I'm trying to slow down my purchases for the rest of the year because I've gone a little crazy. So if I can hold off on reading the Foundation series until next year, that'd be great, because I'd rather not spend any more money on books this year, because it's been a problem. Anyways, then Ain't I a Woman, Black Women and Feminism. This is by Bell Hooks. I read Audre Lorde like a month or two ago. I wasn't super into her. I'm willing to keep trying her. She is a Black feminist that is really looked up to. For me, it's Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks was the very, very first feminist writer that I ever came across. I didn't know anything about feminism growing up. I go to college, I take this basic writing course, and one of the pieces that we're supposed to read is from Ain't I a Woman by Bell Hooks. And that was my coming out of the feminist closet moment. My world just expanded. I'm like, feminism! It's a thing! I love it! And Bell Hooks was my first exposure to that, and I had really great memories about that. And in reading Audre Lorde, I'm like, oh, you know what? Bell Hooks was my first feminist author. I should really read her. And so I got Ain't I a Woman on audiobook, and it was just as great as I remembered. It's not so much like feminist essays like Audre Lorde was. It's more a history of Blackness and feminism, Black feminism, white feminism, slavery. It almost reads like a love letter to Black women. Like, here's how you can get through life and be a feminist, and here's how you tackle the conversations with people who don't really recognize race in their feminism, who aren't as intersectional in their feminism. It was just so good to go back to that. I didn't love the narrator. She sounded familiar because I know I must have heard her voice in another one of my books. I couldn't tell you which one. But the writing was just great, and Bell Hooks will always hold a special place in my heart. Last book that I'm going to talk about is The Joy Luck Club. I thoroughly enjoyed this. So this is supposed to be a series of vignettes. It's telling the stories of 4 different Chinese families. The 4 moms are Chinese and the 4 daughters are Chinese American. So they were born in America, but they have the Chinese history. I believe 2 of them have American fathers, and then 2 of them had Chinese fathers. But anyways, before the beginning of the book, one of the mothers has died, and she has left a spot open in the mahjong table, and one of the daughters goes to fill in, and we're just learning the life stories of these mothers and daughters. So it very much read like a story collection. I enjoyed each of the stories. I loved learning about the moms' histories and the daughters' lives and some of that interaction with each other, some of that family dynamic and the Chinese culture in it. I think my big weak spot with this book, like, I still loved it. It was a 4-star book. But considering the synopsis of this daughter is filling in for her mother at the mahjong table, I wanted more interaction there. I wanted to see more of the present time and their interactions with one another, and I wanted to see their stories weave into each other more. So while I really loved the stories in this, they didn't necessarily connect into each other that much. There were mentions of the other people throughout each of the stories, like, oh, I came across this friend at this point in my life and we're still friends now. But it didn't really integrate itself. That said, definitely worth picking up if you're interested in Chinese American culture at all. It's definitely a great read. So that is it, really. That's what I have to talk about. I'm loving my short wrap-ups. It's so great. I hope you guys are enjoying all the reviews that I'm putting out. That's just kind of the content that I have the time and energy for, but I'm actually really loving spending so much time reviewing single books. I hope you all enjoyed this. Please like, subscribe, be my friend on social media. I will see all of you in my next video. Bye, friends.